Please take your seats.
In the academy.
This episode blends a few different things, and I don't think we've really have we done some type of like lost city civilization type it's not conspiracy, but it's just theory or myths, legends. I don't know what you really want to classify it as.
It depends on how you classify it, because Marco Polo certainly was a tall tale teller that definitely punched up his material.
Yeah, but you could kind of tie that back to certain places that he had to either have a first-hand account or second maybe hand account.
Next closest one I would say was probably the Fountain of Youth.
Okay. Did we do a Fountain of Youth?
Yeah, we did the Living Forever.
Okay, that's right.
So where guy goes over looking for the Fountain of Youth.
Ponce
de Leon goes over there. Then you have that weird Jester Steve or whatever. Prester John.
This one seems kind of different though, because, and we were just talking El Dorado before this.
Yep.
That's like a place where people tried to go and find it. This one, when this story was written, no one had the ability to find this place, even if they wanted to.
Because Atlantis sunk into the ocean and was covered by mud. How are you going to find that?
Exactly.
Plus, you have to figure out where where it sunk. And
yeah. Come on, it's easy. You just follow Plato's instructions to the T. Tells you exactly where it's at.
Yeah, we had a philosopher, Plato, that told the story of Atlantis. And throughout history, usually if you have a single source for something, it's probably because it's made up.
Yes.
But this somehow, Atlantis has survived through the ages, and I do think that media plays a part in it now, because, I mean, what doesn't have a little nod to an Atlantis type? We have a goddamn water resort down in the Caribbean.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting about it is, for a long time, there wasn't really anything to do with, like, space.
Yeah.
Space was never even like a concept, or like people could look up and see the stars and everything. But so having stuff that involved the ocean, I think, was still mysterious enough because people didn't know what was below the waves.
Yeah.
So you were just telling a story about this super advanced civilization. And I'm throughout this podcast, it's basically just going to be like, how do people take Plato seriously in regards to this? But at the same time, I really do like this because I think he pulled inspiration from other places throughout the Mediterranean to kind of inspire him for this. And I think those places just by themselves, even without the Atlantis thing around it, are super interesting.
Yeah. Self-admittedly, at the beginning when we were doing the research in this, I was a bit of poopy pants. I think I had a little pop on you one night where I had tried to watch documentaries, and 5 minutes in, everything turned into an Ancient Aliens, that it angered me to no end.
I know.
Because if we're talking aliens and we're talking Atlantis, I believe one of them is real. I don't need the one that I believe is real conflating with the one that's definitely fake. The only reason I think aliens are real is just based on statistics.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, too. The whole thing with Ancient Aliens is that they came down to Earth and, like, they're still, like, you know, building civilizations, things like that. You're already skeptical about Atlantis. Add aliens onto that, that's a fight that you can't come back from.
Yeah, exactly. You're already down and you're just throwing haymakers hoping that you can connect with something.
Okay, well, before we get too far into it, remember everyone, patreon.com/historicallyhigh. A lot of bonus content. In fact, I think we're kind of knocking out bonus content every week.
Pretty close.
Give you a little something on Fridays to get you into the weekend. Socials are all the same. Keep the comments coming. Keep the reviews coming. We're creeping up on 25,000 subs on Spotify. That's huge. Again, we can't thank you guys enough. Still love doing this.
Yeah. No, every week is just a different fun adventure for us, and I hope it is for you too.
I mean, I can't remember half the stuff from the last 4 years, but you know what? There's a lot of stuff we've studied. All right. Well, without making you wait any longer, let's get into Atlantis. Okay, I mean, it starts with Plato.
Oh, buddy, we can't just start the show with Plato. We have to give them a little teaser of what we're going to be going into, what we're going to be talking about, because there is this kind of wonderful thing. And admittedly, I was never when I took philosophy in college, this blew by me. I was not a philosophy guy. I feel like this takes a certain growing into to really respect and understand philosophy. And with the way that Plato brings this stuff to light, it's so incredible because these aren't books. These are just kind of like diatribes that he's writing.
He writes in a way that he's writing a conversation. It seems like there's always multiple people that are discussing this. He's almost doing the minutes of a debate.
Yeah.
Or like of just a discussionary period.
And this is straight out of what we're going to be talking about. This is the setup we're talking about. Listen, Socrates, to tell a tale which, though strange, is certainly true. It was attested by Solon, who was the wisest of the 7 sages. I will tell you an old world story which I heard from an aged man. Critias is the man who is talking here. Basically, he is telling of a time that was nearly 99 years of age was the man who was telling Critias this. Now, Socrates, to make an end to my preface, I'm ready to tell you the whole tale. I will give you only the general heads, but the particulars as they were told to me.
I love how he's just like, hey, Socrates, come here. I'm going to tell you about something.
But take this with what we're going to be talking about. I will give you not only the general heads, but the particulars as they were told to me. So each and every one of these details that we're going to be talking about with Atlantis is just straight from oral tradition.
Well, okay, let's go back a little bit even further than that. So you mentioned Solon.
Yeah.
So this book is essentially one of Plato's dialogues. I believe it's the dialogue of, is it Timaeus?
Timaeus and Critias. They were two different dialogues, but they're just finely tuned together.
Socrates is in there at some point too, apparently.
Yeah, Socrates was the teacher of Plato. Socrates, I believe, doesn't have any writings that are attributed to him. Yeah, Socrates. Mm-hmm. Most of the reason that we know about some of Socrates' theories and beliefs are because directly from Plato's work.
So Solon was somebody that, and I'm not sure if Critias had been related to him, but this had been a story passed down through Critias's family about Solon. So I'm not sure if it came directly from Solon or Solon was a family friend and told his great-great-great-great-grandfather. But the story was that he had gone down to Egypt. Solon had gone down there. And he had found record, hieroglyphics, things like that, from the Egyptians, that there had been this beef between Athens and Atlantis. And this Atlantean-Athens beef essentially started with Atlantis being the aggressor, coming in to try to conquer Athens. They had conquered like large swaths of Europe already and everything like that.
We're going to lay out the whole story, don't you worry.
So, and then Athens being, Athens is the 300 Spartans that are able to defeat the mighty Atlantis.
Interesting.
This super advanced island kingdom. But these events that Solon is hearing about are from 9,000 years prior to Solon, even predating the Egyptians, which means that it was oral history passed to the Egyptians who then, once they got written word or whatever, then they started documenting it. Then it goes to Solon, who again is saying it by word of mouth to another person.
It was also 9,000 years from the date that Solon went and spoke to the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. Solon being much older than Plato, we're talking about a time right around, I believe this was written and told 375 BCE. So before Common Era, before CE, we're all the way back then. In the time when you still counted down to zero.
Yeah.
9,000 years beyond that.
So with this, and we'll call it what it is, with this fiction that Plato was writing, he's already, it feels like, setting the stage for like, hey, I'm going to tell you some stuff, but I have, given you guys the disclaimer that this is coming from so long
Yeah.
ago, and all of these third hand, whatever accounts that you want to say of people then bringing back the knowledge. And then he goes on to say, even with that, though, I have all of this super specific information about this place.
Yeah, I don't know why I just look at the board. Timaeus was written by Plato in 360 BCE. At the time, he was teaching young minds this. They were the future. These great philosophical minds such as Aristotle. Aristotle was one of his students. Plato, who was taught by Socrates himself that we were just talking about, was born kind of in an interesting time for Greece, because as we know, during this time, Greece wasn't united.
There were a lot of people in Greece that called themselves Grecian.
Grecians.
Grecian.
But we're talking about a time where classical Athens is kind of the taste. It was between 428 and 423 that he was born. He was born into a pretty wealthy aristocratic family in this classical Athens period. We had the Greco-Persian Wars that had just taken place from 499 to 449 BCE.
If you want information on that, go back and listen to the episode.
The Achaemenid Empire. Fantastic. One of my favorite ancient episodes that we've done. Greece had defeated the Persian Empire, the unbeatable empire, the Persian Empire that had spread all the way down to Egypt, came back all the way up through the Babylonian Empire, through the Median Empire. There was, I believe, one that started with an L in there. Go listen to the episode. It's awesome. But they were able to finally put down the threat of Persia. Things were pretty good for a little while because you had the Battle of Marathon that was fought by basically anybody who could afford armor to go out and fight. So you have the elites.
Yeah.
But then you have the Sea Battle of Salamis. And during the Sea Battle of Salamis, it didn't matter if you were rich. You didn't need any money to go row a boat. But if you get that W like they did in Salamis, you're able to come home and you're a war hero because you fought in a victory that the Greeks used to beat the Persian Empire. That doesn't stick around for very long. This unity doesn't happen because then you have the Peloponnesian War or the Athenian War, depending on whose side you're getting it from, where you had the Athenian-led Delian League that was at war with the Spartan-led Peloponnesian League. I believe we also had an episode on this. It might have been the Athens episode. Plato enters the world kind of headlong into this because it ranges from 431 to 404 BCE. The Spartans end up defeating Athens, and because the Spartans are victorious, Athens is probably going to get torched again like they did with the Persians. But instead, the Spartans maybe did something worse. They ushered in an era called the 30 Tyrants' Reign in Athens, and this lasted only, I believe it was like 13 months. It was 404 to 403. They were installed by the Spartans. Two of these 30 tyrants were former pupils of Socrates, and it was Plato's uncle, and there was another distant relative of Plato that were a part of these 30 tyrants.
I would love to see the Socrates coaching tree. We haven't done Socrates yet.
No,
that's going to be crazy to see that coaching tree.
Yeah, he's got pretty much... He's revolutionary for his time.
My philosophical seeds spread everywhere.
That was really the extent of Socrates' relationship with these tyrants. Socrates would refuse an order from the 30 tyrants to arrest a Democrat that was marked for execution. He basically took a step back and said, I'm a philosopher. I have nothing to do with what you guys want. The death will not be on my hands. You have these tyrants that are ruling that are trying to kill a Democrat who's trying to push Athens back into democracy.
Yeah, so you have people that are like not just, I mean, you do have like philosophers and everything, but a lot of these guys are what you would consider like statesmen.
Yeah.
So they also have pull within, well, not during the time of the 30 tyrants, but once there was like a Senate or some type of like representation system, these guys would be kind of the ones stepping up to be those people.
Yeah, and democracy is restored in 403. Unfortunately for Socrates, his association with the tyrants wasn't forgotten. He was brought to trial for impiety and for corrupting the youth. And for these two crimes committed, I believe impiety was like him introducing new gods into the lexicon or
Oh,
some
you
shit
can't
like
do that.
No, and then of course corrupting the youth because he was a former teacher to two of the 30 tyrants.
Yeah, and he was telling these kids about the new gods.
Yeah, that were in there. So he ends up being put to death by the administration of a poison. He drank hemlock. And interestingly enough, it was him that actually drank the hemlock himself. They didn't force it down his throat, but I'm sure there was a little bit of valor in that, I guess.
There was a sword point at his back.
Yeah, maybe. Upon the death of Socrates in this new democracy, things kind of the planes change for Plato a little bit because Plato is of this belief as a philosopher. He carries this through a lot of his writings. He's going to talk about it in the Republic that we're going to talk about. Plato believes that there should be philosophy ingrained in the leadership. He doesn't really like democracy because he believes that there is a large part of unlearned, I guess, simple-minded people that are able to vote. There are, but at the same time, we're not talking about a true democracy because you still had slavery.
Yeah.
You still had women that were never going to be able to vote. Usually it was men of means, but there were some standard folk that were standard men.
Yeah.
I believe of a certain age. I think they had to be landowners too that were able to vote. So he believes in a system of not necessarily a kingdom, but he believes that anybody who is ruling should be well-versed or a philosopher himself. So since Plato's opinions have been taken away and he's still a little pissed that they killed his mentor Socrates, he ends up heading for Megara in 396 to study. He returns to Athens for some mandatory military service that came in 394. I don't remember what war it was. But then he ends up traveling away from Athens again to a place called Arcetius, and he studied with the Pythagoreans. So we get Pythagoras, the math man.
Yep, and their theorems.
As another philosopher that's out there. His trip after that to Syracuse took place when Plato was 40 years old. So he's been around, he's learned from all of these other philosophers. Athens is still his home. On this trip to Syracuse, I believe, it was either his trip to Syracuse or Megara, he actually gets taken and attempted to be sold into slavery. So it wasn't.
This is a very smart slave.
Yeah, not a good vacation for him.
He talks a lot, though.
413, Athens lost their almost entire naval fleet at Syracuse. In Crete, they ended up losing 40,000 men and 200 ships during the Peloponnesian War. So flashback to that Peloponnesian War when you have Athens that is a sea power that is taking it to the Spartans on the sea. The Spartans had a superior military, but you end up getting a little bit of this hubris, will be, I think, the word of the episode, of going to Syracuse and Crete and losing 40,000 men and 200 ships, basically just gutting your naval power. Foreshadowing, maybe?
Oh, well, there's inspiration in everything in this. The whole Atlantis thing it's world building. He's basically saying, I need to make something believable enough that they can't question me on the details because I'm providing a ton of details, but nothing specific enough that someone can ever call me out on this. Yeah. Because if I say that this Atlantis was actually in this place or in that place, and someone from there ends up showing up and is like, no, like, what do you 9,000? No, man, like we were never in Island City or anything like that. He basically just has to invent something that requires no proof whatsoever for him to have to, support.
Yeah, during this time, you have Plato basically reading everything around. And our ancient grandfather, Herodotus, that wrote basically the history of the Greco-Persian Wars and also just wrote so much other fun stuff about travel and stories and all of this. You have Plato taking in all of his works, understanding what went on during these Greco-Persian wars that he wasn't alive for. You also get a guy named Thucydides that wrote an accounting of the Peloponnesian War as it's going on, basically from a general's point of view. So you have these two very large pieces of history that you're able to hear these stories and start to pull things from. His bag for this is so deep. And his return from Syracuse would see him found his academy in 383 BCE. Around 375 BCE, I think that's where I got this number, he authored something called the Republic. It was another one of these, what was the word you used earlier?
Oh, a dialogue.
Yeah, dialogue, yes. This was it's right fucking there. The philosophical dialogue discusses Socrates' exploration of this nature of justice and the ideal state, this Kallipolis, the superiority of a just life. Justice is the harmony of specialized roles within the state and soul. So justice not only plays a part in the building of a strong state, justice also brings harmony and balance to the soul.
It's the idea of a utopian society.
Mm-hmm. This is where he makes the proposition of philosophers being kings, but also this whole entire thing, like I just said, Socrates is discussing the exploration of nature. This isn't Plato out there saying these things directly. This is a dialogue that Socrates is having. Mm-hmm. So it's not him saying it. It's not Plato trying to teach these things. It's him using this allegorical dialogue to say, if you don't believe me, you remember how great Socrates was.
He's using Socrates to make it more believable.
Like a
so
puppet.
He's writing it as if he's literally, again, one of Socrates' students, but basically he's on page duty that day.
Yeah.
When he's talking to this Critias guy, he's just there with a quill and ink, having to take down all of the minutes of their debate. And that's why he's able to write from this perspective. Because otherwise, now you're even adding someone else and be like, no, actually, this was someone else that was in the meeting, and then I had to talk to them.
Well, we get to the first of these dialogues. Timaeus was written around 360 BCE. It's a dialogue that's written mostly in these long monologues of Timaeus and Critias, and you have Socrates basically playing this listener role. He kind of kicks things off as far as talking about kind of the dinner party aspect of this, and then you have Timaeus and Critias that launch into these different diatribes. The beginning is Socrates is summarizing the ideal state from the Republic, kind of rehashing that whole thing, and then he just sort of settles in to listen. You have Timaeus that begins with this distinction between physical and eternal worlds, just basically trying to explain that there is the world of the gods and then what we have now. Mm-hmm. There is crossover in between these two worlds, but at the same time, our ultimate determination is what we do beyond what the gods have tried to get their fingers into. The Critias was the second dialogue. This was actually believed that this was supposed to be a trilogy, but something happened. Who the hell knows? Timaeus begins with this distinction, or he begins with that distinction of the world. Critias finishes off Timaeus's parts by starting to explain kind of what happened to Atlantis. He gives the end of the story first, and thank God he did, because had he put it at the end, we'll talk about what happens at the end. We may never know what happened to Atlantis.
Yeah.
Just a crazy story. So as Critias begins, he recounts the ancient story that we started out with, told to his grandfather by Solon, who heard it from an Egyptian priest. The priest ends up dating this story back 9,000 years prior to their time. Atlantis was created by Poseidon.
Of course. It's an ocean city.
Yep. And Poseidon had fallen in love with the daughter of a mortal couple who had died. From that,
Cleito? I think was her name.
Cleito, I believe her name was. He creates this island for Cleito that was beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Depending on what time in either Greek or Roman history the Pillars of Hercules move, just depending on where the talk is. For this point in time, I think it's just generally accepted that it was the Strait of Gibraltar.
Yes, I have a bone to pick about that.
Okay.
But we can get to that a little bit later.
Okay, we can do that. So you have this island is located beyond the Pillars of Hercules. He fashioned the island into alternating rings of sea and land to protect this main island. He produced springs of hot and cold water because apparently he's Poseidon. I guess he can do that. Poseidon and Cleito had 5 sets of male twins. That feels like a lot of twins. The oldest being Atlas. Of course, you're going to name the island of Atlantis and the town, or the area of Atlantis with these concentric rings after your son. This is where we get the name Atlantic Ocean.
You think you would call it Atlantis?
Yeah, I got a bone to pick with that too, because is this just a different Atlas from the Titan that holds up the sky?
I think it's supposed to be kind of the same.
Oh, is it?
That's the thing. There's a lot of, as vague as this is already, there's a lot of just fill in the blank type stuff here.
We kind of are starting to try to nail Jello to the wall at this point. You're right. But Atlas is made the king of he will rule the entire kingdom. Then you have basically all of his brothers from there being kings of these regions. This center island was said to be larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined.
So Atlantis itself was a kingdom, but I think when people think about just like the mental image you get, it's just of like a large island and everything. It wasn't just that. It was an island, but it also had areas around it. That was like just kind of the capital city. It feels like the way they describe the city.
Yeah, I don't know.
With the concentric. What I'm saying is this. Within Plato's, him talking about that, when he talks about a kingdom, he means it's not just that island in the domain of Atlantis. There's other areas that they could have conquered, because that was the whole point about...
yes. Later on, the kingdom will expand.
Correct, yes. So the kingdom of Atlantis incorporates stuff other than just the island. Mm-hmm. But the island is the whole thing that sinks, and so that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's home base. Mm-hmm. The infrastructure involved these sophisticated engineering marvels. They include massive bridges. You're going to have canals within these land rings, so you're able to move in between the concentric circles. There's a 300-foot wide channel that opens up to the sea. It had these city walls that were coated in brass, tin, and this precious metal that they had mined off of Atlantis that was called, do you have orichalcum?
Orichalcum.
Orichalcum. God, that word sucks.
And it's like a blend of something. It's like iron, tin, copper, and I want to say something else. Zinc?
It's supposedly this is a metal that's still not known on Earth today.
It kind of reminds me how the Greeks also had like ambrosia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just this mythical metal, like marvel like adamantium and stuff.
Yeah. It also had these rounded city walls and these giant castles. And I keep wanting to jump ahead, so we might as well do this. The Achaemenid Empire had all of these wondrous towns in it that had these rounded walls around these giant palaces, basically. This feels like we're starting to get into the realm of maybe he's pointing to certain things as far as things that he's learned from histories.
Already trying to paint it in a way that you make the association between a nation that fell and this one, kind of like you're saying, foreshadowing.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that.
You don't want to design it if you're creating essentially the whole Atlantis story is Plato's way of saying this is what happens if you get too big for your britches. It's a story about hubris. The Atlanteans, they thought that they were on par or equal footing with the gods. They had tried to overtake the Athenians, which, being favored more by the gods, Athens, the gods got angry at Atlantis and struck it from the earth by sinking it below the waves. So it's almost this story of like, you don't want to paint the main character as Athens, because then there's too much of being like, wait, so are you saying Athens is going to fall? Somebody has to be able to make the connection saying, this kind of sounds like, maybe the Persian Empire a little bit, and they were also defeated or struck down.
Yeah, we'll kind of work our way into his description of Athens it's pretty funny to me. It also had this large fertile plain that produced every food that was necessary. That sounds a lot like the Median Empire, which was taken over by the Achaemenids. Their navy was spare at all. This feels like we're kind of maybe pointing to a little Athens here. Maybe. They had a massive port that was teeming with trade from all of these other nations. That sounds a hell of a lot like Athens as well. Also, we're talking about a time, we'll throw 9,500, or 9,500 BCE, somewhere around there, we'll call it. Travel by water was thought to be a fairly new invention as far as like maybe 6,000 BCE, something like that. To push it out to 9,000, where you're talking about an island that could be out in the ocean that is conducting this much trade, not only would you have to buy that was happening from Atlantis' point of view, but if you have a teeming port with all of these other ships that are coming in, wouldn't that mean that there would be other nations that have figured out sea travel?
Unless it's your ships that are simply going out and bringing stuff back.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of where you lean into like the advanced civilization part of it. Because the way, he's telling a story about something that happened just 10,000 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
So at that point, people are like, well, did Athens have boats 10,000 years ago? No, they didn't actually. So that's why we were attacked. This nation came in to try to attack us, and we had to defend ourselves, and we ended up, driving them off.
Yeah, I can see that. The society, as Chris was talking about earlier, begins as this virtuous utopian society, but as generations continue on, they fall victim to the same human trappings that a lot of present-day people do, with greed and corruption and just turning away from the gods. That one I'm gonna throw out. Greed and corruption, two things that still happen today that are always kind of the fall of man.
Never out of fashion.
No, but the turning of the way of the gods feels like we're setting up. The part that I love about this is we're going to talk about Homer. We're going to talk about Hercules. All of these great works are these oral traditions that came down prior to this. It's the nod to the classics, I think, that show just what a great philosopher he was. Because he's not only talking about Athens, he's pointing to all of these great works and bringing certain things in to where it gives you a little sense of, like when you see a commercial from your childhood.
I think he was from a philosophy standpoint, yeah. I don't think he was super great at writing fiction. And the reason I say that is, again, he's going to be borrowing a lot of stuff from a lot of different places. But then this story is very short. And I know that you said maybe it was going to be the first in a series of 3 or whatnot.
Second,
but
yeah.
This is simply a story of, I'm telling you about the city. I'm telling you they went to war with Athens. And then I'm telling you that the gods struck it down because of their hubris. And then after that, the story's kind of over. He's just having to pretty much tell a very short story of just a beginning, a middle, of an end that cleans up very nicely.
And can lead to where they are in current day.
Yeah, if they make enough money off that first movie, yeah, then, we'll make a sequel, but we can revamp a couple things and just, maybe do like a backstory or something like that.
And maybe that's what it was. Maybe the students had heard Timaeus and Critias, and he was getting ready to wind up into the third, and they stopped him and just said, hey, we get it.
There was a city. Okay, so what we have for the description, the criteria for Atlantis is it's...
what was the most important thing that they had in Atlantis?
The temple. Elephants?
They had elephants in Atlantis on an island out in the middle of the ocean. Come on. What are we doing?
Is that the most ridiculous thing about this?
Well, and it's one of those things where it's just like a throw-in. He's like, oh, yeah, and they had elephants. But is that a nod to the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian Empire
Maybe
that
that's
came
again
in?
to
Did
make
they
it
have
seem
elephants?
so advanced. Like, I've seen an elephant. How would you get one of those out there to an island? You'd have to be very technologically advanced. It's all just to sell the story.
As Chris keeps talking about this, when he says technologically advanced, there's a belief now in people that look into Atlantis that want to talk about higher powers and beings and alien races that were over there pushing their way into Atlantis to make these people technologically advanced. technologically advanced now. They believe it's like computers and calculations and all this kind of stuff. Highly advanced for the time of Plato was like, we got a drain in the road. We know how to funnel water to all of the houses within the city.
See this bathroom? It's on the second floor. How did you do that?
So the words advanced society, you kind of have to take with a grain of salt because this is advanced society for 3000 or for 360 BCE. They don't even have lighters at that point in time.
So description and criteria for Atlantis, it's again beyond the pillars of Heracles. Alternating concentric rings, 3 rings of water, 2 of land connected by bridges. They pointed out that the city seemed to be made of like a colored stone for the architecture of white, black, and red blocks. You mentioned the 300-foot wide, 100-foot deep channel that's connecting it to the sea, hot springs, a huge trade hub. And it also said that they had writing, and they would have like a stamp or emblem that they could use on things, which I know sounds like weird being like, so they have writing and a stamp. To be able to carve something and to be able to have clay and use it to seal, like that's a weird kind of advancement to have, because it's not really a survival type advancement. It's just, we have so much time. Let's just design a ring that we can press into so people
seal.
know this note's from us. Yeah.
Pretty much. I don't know where I forgot. We had to have talked about it during the Athens episode. But as far as money, anything like that, you have later on, you're going to start seeing pressings in silver as the insignia of the time and where that gold or silver or shilling came from. Atlantis is not only probably pressing their own money, he doesn't say that, I would assume so, but they've actually taken their stamp and it becomes a wide array of places that are getting it, because as Atlantis is a superior naval power, it's visiting the entirety of North Africa and taking that. It's visiting a lot of southern Europe, and it's
like
taking
the Iberian
over that.
Peninsula, places like that.
Yeah, you have this kingdom that's growing and growing and growing, a lot like we just talked about the Persian Empire, pushing up into parts of Europe and going down all the way down into Egypt.
Do you think that's the reason he also put it west? So like the Pillars of Hercules being the Strait of Gibraltar, Atlantis is, surprise, surprise, out in the Atlantic. It's not in the Mediterranean as Plato tells it. But do you think that's purposeful because he's naming some place that what are the chances anybody reading this is going to go out there and they already know what's east? They know that's the Achaemenid Empire. That's the Persians. So if you say that it's that direction, it's like, we're a lot closer to that direction. We know everything between us and them. We know that this couldn't be there or anything like that. Like we're so smart, like we would have found it by now. If had that happened, or we would have heard stories about it. No. This took place miles away, out into the Atlantic Ocean that you guys will never see.
It's also pretty crazy to think that this is pre-Alexander, huh? But not like super far away pre-Alexander. Like this is Philip of Macedon coming down and subjugating most of Greece, and then Alexander working his way out from there. So the time frame is pretty close. Was that everything for Atlantis?
Let's see.
So now we have Athens.
Oh, the destruction.
Yeah, let's do Athens, and then we'll talk about the war and then the destruction.
Okay.
So on the flip side of this history, Athens is described as this perfectly ordered, virtuous society. It's a harmonious state full of piety, wisdom, and military prowess with no need for a large navy. Athens is set up in a similar fashion as the city in the Republic. It sounds like a lot of Socrates' ideas that were told by Plato are showing up in Athens. You have this warrior class, sounds a lot like the Spartans. Common property, sounds a lot like the Spartans. And high moral standards, sounds a lot like the Spartans. They'd come into contact with the Atlanteans defending the city. Atlantis had taken most, just as we were talking about, most of northern Africa, including Egypt. You have these large swaths of Europe that have been pulled into their kingdom. The army of Atlantis was said to have numbered 1.6 million people.
Of course.
Now, I saw a calculation on this. I believe they said if the believed size of the army was 1.6 million people, it would take about 6 million people to feed the 1.6 million people to go to war. At that point in time, if you're putting them at 7.6 million people, that's pretty close to like a quarter of the entire population of the world.
Yeah.
And especially 9,000 BCE, we're talking about a
Buddy, you're pumping up the story.
yeah, the numbers feel like he was doing this intentionally. But like he said everything with a smile, I'm
Correct.
sure.
But what's even crazier is he describes it in such a way that you just would have to think that you'd stop for 2 seconds and say, okay, if there's that many of them, man, there's not even that many of us here. And like, we're on a peninsula, we're not on an island. Like, how are there that many people on this island? And then all of a sudden, after, this great reckoning that happens, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Like all 7 million of them were on the island at the same time.
Yeah. So you have this 1.6 million strong army that dwarfs the Athenian warrior class that will be defending Athens. Athens ends up prevailing in this battle to save their city. Shortly after, Atlantis gets punished by Poseidon.
Doesn't anybody know how old Athens is?
Well,
Athens is nowhere near this old. He doesn't have to, in his bid to prove Atlantis is real and everything, he doesn't even attempt to be like, oh, what was that? Hey, is Athens 9,000 years old? I don't think it's that old. He's like, I don't discuss that in this book.
Well, I think their belief is that Athens is so old that they had enough time to create a system of writing and then lose the system of writing and then create a system of writing again.
How do you chalk up, if you're that old and everything, how do you chalk up losing the Peloponnesian War?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of this stuff that I feel like he throws in to make it so blatantly obvious. But some people somehow don't pick up on this.
I don't know how much. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Do you feel like this was a popular story at the time? And again, I know there's not a ton of stuff to read back then. Or do you think this is one of those things that got picked up and then just because it was so outside of anything else or so unlike anything else that it just caught?
You had to know how to read. Mm-hmm. Pretty important back then and not a skill that everybody had.
Correct. But let me ask you this. Imagine you can read. So you read this.
Yeah.
And you go out with a whole bunch of people that can't read. And you're telling them this story. This story has so much stuff that you can just remember.
Yeah.
Because it is so specific and so unique that then that can sort of, you don't need to go back and read it if you can't. Now you just get to go talk about that and you're like, yeah, it was a city that was in the ocean. And it just keeps going.
It's
like a good episode of a show that you can describe to somebody and they go and can describe it to somebody else.
It turned back into an oral tradition probably pretty quickly, but judging by what we know and how it kind of falls out of fashion to talk about or to write about or anything like that, I don't know how widely it was spread. I don't know. We're talking about a time way before you could just mass print shit. So
there's a difference between talking about it and talking about it as if it's a real place.
Yeah.
Because if you're just talking about it and you're like, we're making a Marvel movie or DC movie, Aquaman, Atlantis, you're like, that's some cool shit. Show me that. You get someone on the TV like you're talking about looking like ancient aliens being like, and this is where we think Atlantis is. You're like, ugh, next channel.
Are you talking about Graham Hancock?
No, I was thinking about the guy from Ancient Aliens.
I think they're one and the same. I think the guy with the crazy hair on Ancient Aliens might be more well-educated than Graham Hancock. I don't like Graham Hancock. I know you watched Ancient Apocalypse? So I'm pretty sure that you had sent me, we were doing maybe the Aztecs, and you had sent me an Ancient Apocalypse, where he goes on to talk about how there had to be all of these higher intelligence, advanced civilizations that had been washed away by time.
I didn't necessarily say that.
Well, The possibility of it.
Yes.
I think there's a possibility of it too. But I got a little taste of Graham Hancock doing this research. Don't like him.
Again, here's the thing. This is learning about Atlantis from the alien people. There's too many things that are unbelievable there.
Yeah.
If you were to just present an idea and Graham Hancock didn't have other more out there ideas and everything, like some crazier ones, and he just had this one idea that was semi-logical, it would be different.
Graham Hancock loses me when he says that this is definitive proof
I can't even remember that.
of Atlantis.
I can't even remember that that series.
So Poseidon is pissed. He's mad that Atlantis, this place that he had built with his wife, and he had put out his 10 twin sons to rule over, has turned against the gods. He ends up sending violent earthquakes and floods and tsunamis. It ends up sinking the island into the sea and sealing it with an impassable barrier of mud. I feel like this should have been the end of Atlantis. But it lives on in kind of this weird conspiracy way that we can't just look back at this story and say, yeah, no, that was fake.
Mm-hmm.
The ending of the Critias gets cut short at this meeting of the gods. And when I say cut short, I mean Critias says the god of gods, Zeus, seeing the corruption of the Atlanteans, determined to chastise them. Zeus begins to speak. And that's where it all ends. That's where this story that Critias just told about the Atlanteans just ends right before Zeus is about to weigh in on the Atlantean problem.
Yeah, Plato hadn't figured out what Zeus was going to say.
It's the biggest tease ever because your mind goes a million ways. And we had talked about this in studying it. That's why this is art. Because art is supposed to make you think. It's supposed to make you ponder. You're supposed to wonder what the painter was doing, what his muse was.
How did they want people to see this?
And at this point in time, Plato ends it in this way where you're just like, oh boy, where was he going with this? Was Zeus angry at Poseidon for doing this? Or was he did he send Poseidon to do this maybe?
I think this is just something you're doing until you have another idea. Here's how I see the whole Atlantis thing. I think that in writing this, Plato basically just cherry-picked stuff from different places, from different legends, things that he had heard, and just combined this all into one thing. And because of that, that was stuff that he was able to make up. Where's he going to go next after that?
Yeah.
He's like, shit, what is Zeus going to say? I guess he can say nothing. We'll just wait for part 2. And then Critias died, so we couldn't talk to him anymore.
Who knows? Maybe. One of the 30 tyrants was actually named Critias as well.
Oh, really?
So I don't know if he was modeled after this character, because Critias, I believe, was one of Socrates.
Because he's talking to Socrates.
Yeah. Feel that's very interesting.
So he makes the guy that's saying this not a guy that's going to be looked upon fondly for his main audience.
Well, potentially if he's a bad enough guy.
Because they don't look kindly upon Socrates, right?
Well, no. I think that was more the aristocracy and the democracy that was going on in the leaders. But Aristotle believed that Plato had invented this story. He invented the islands to teach some philosophical meaning. Really few in the ancient world took it as fact. A lot of the people that heard this story weren't really on board. Pliny the Elder, a later historical grandfather for us, a more recent ancient grandfather to us. Pliny the Elder basically gives his summation of the story and then just says, if that's true.
Yeah,
at the
it's
end
a
of
polite way of,
And I'm sure he had to have written that before Vesuvius erupted, because Pliny, being the guy that goes to try to save the city, is probably going over towards that volcano, and Plato and Atlantis are just playing in his head.
Well, here's the thing. Technically, in the story of Atlantis, from Plato's perspective, there was no volcano. It was just earthquakes and a tsunami. It crushed the city with the earthquake, and then the waves wiped it clean.
Yeah, I guess that is true, but he's probably got to be looking at this like, shit,
He's got to be looking at the destruction of a place and looking and being like, wow, did they pull an Atlantis over there? Is that why he's destroying Pompeii?
Yeah, we heard about the whorehouse. They must have really turned away from God for them to do this.
There's dicks all over the city.
Arguments as to the location have gone on pretty much, I'm sure, since the story was told. The location of the pillars have changed, obviously, when you go from Greek to Romans telling the story of Heracles to Hercules. You're going to put things in different areas that have a more distinct meaning to Rome. While at the same time, you're going to see us get back into Heracles a little bit because we got to go visit one of his labors later on. Religious accounts that mention this story were few and far between as well because we see the growth of Christianity, a monotheistic religions that aren't going to be looking at these pagan teachings and throwing those out there for brain teasers for anybody that they're trying to get their hooks into.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a good look to be preaching the word of Jesus and you're talking about Poseidon.
This is where you have like a church designed superhero and you have all the kids at Sunday school read that. And then someone's like, well, why don't you tell them about like Superman or something? Like, shut up. We don't talk about those aren't approved gods or those aren't approved characters. These kids will think Superman is way too cool.
The angelic falcon is the Superman of our Christian world.
They can't know there was a lightning god and an ocean god and an underworld and all that stuff.
Yeah. It only makes sense to me that as the Enlightenment is happening, that you would start to see this renewed interest in some of these Greek teachings and philosophy.
It goes in phases, man. Like there are certain points in history where this just comes to the forefront.
Yeah, and it shows up because you see minds that are trying to go back and make sense of what's going on in the present and this transition that's going on. Starting down in Rome and in what would become Italy and then spreading up into England. We're not touching England or anything like that. As far north as we're probably going to go with Spain in this episode because it just gets weird up there. There's a lot of weird shit that's going on. And there wasn't a whole lot that was going on up there, I don't think. But yeah, you have Atlantis at the forefront of world exploration because as this opens up, you see that now there's possibilities beyond these pillars that we were told. So if the Enlightenment happens, you read beyond the pillars, you're thinking the Strait of Gibraltar. That means that if you're crossing the Atlantic Ocean, there's a non-zero chance you're going to be pulling your boats right across where Atlantis was.
Yeah.
There's a chance that you're going to be there. The New World was seen as the possible resurrection of Atlantis. And I say possible resurrection because every time they talked about it, I didn't really understand because if Atlantis sunk into the ocean, how in the hell are the Americas?
They thought it was India.
Yeah. Columbus thought, he thought he was headed to China. But now we're just going to be like, oh yeah, no, the Americas.
But it makes sense at the same time because, again, this is at a time when it's relatively new that new continents have been found by the Europeans and everything.
And so I guess you don't know how big the area is.
You don't. But guess what goes along with a mysterious new continent? That mysterious lost city. If we didn't know these continents were here, of course we didn't know where Atlantis was.
By then you have to think, if you're talking about the 15th century, though, an advanced civilization from 9,000 years prior to, I guess it would be about 11 or 12,000 years at that point, from that point in time. If that's a highly advanced civilization, you have to be ahead of where they were 12,000 years in the future, right?
I think that's why it keeps escalating. I think when it was talked about, like you were saying, an advanced civilization to Plato just had to be more advanced in a couple different ways. Their language, it could have been the way they did their masonry. It could have been the way they dug their canals. It could have been anything. Once you got to the point of the Enlightenment, it now has to be more advanced when you're talking about it to people of the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
And now you start to think of like the steampunk shit where everything, and then all of a sudden for us now, when you think of Atlantis, it has to be like Aquaman. It has to be this futuristic city that has all of this high technology because, I mean, like that's the only way that you're going to, I guess, keep that like excitement about it. Because if you're just like, it was just a lost city that was like, had second story toilets. You're like, there's actually a lot of those around the world.
Well, it doesn't hurt when you have guys like Da Vinci that are drawing renderings of Atlantis, that are drawing what he thinks Atlantis looks like.
Yeah.
Because Da Vinci's got his name out there. He's a pretty famous guy. So if you're going through his indexes or whatever they were called.
Codices?
Yeah, codices. And you see some pictures of Atlantis, you think, well, goddamn, this guy drew cars. He drew all of these things. He built these statues. He made these paintings.
Aliens.
Yeah, there's a good chance that he's onto something. Maybe Atlantis wasn't a lie.
Also, Atlantis by Da Vinci. That sounds like a badass cologne.
It does. It's probably, yeah, it smells of rich mahogany, I'm sure. All right, before we jump into kind of the New World stuff, we want to take a bathroom break?
Yep. Well, hello. Listen, while we head to the restroom and get ourselves something to drink, why don't you do something nice for yourselves? Head on over to patreon.com/historicallyhigh and get signed up for a little bonus content. I mean, come on, you deserve it.
If you want to keep up with this, our main source of social media is going to be our Instagram, which is historically high pod, POD.
You can also head over to, it's Twitter, it's X, it's Twitter, come on, at historically high, and that's high, H-I like, high.
If you have any recommendations, you want to get to us, just want to reach out and say hello, you can hit us up on our email at historicallyhighpodcast, HIGH podcast at gmail.com.
All right, and with that said, let's get back to the good stuff. All right, so now we're in more, well, I guess not really more recent time, but recent in comparison to Plato.
Yeah, and we're up to the point of the conquistadors. There was a Spanish historian. His name was Francisco Lopez de Gama. He was actually, I believe he was a secretary for Hernan Cortez. So a guy that is going to be getting a lot of firsthand knowledge from going over and touring the Americas. He believed Plato was talking about the Americas. He looked at all of these stories that he's getting about these Mayan societies and these Aztec societies that have these cities that have castles that are covered in gold and silver and everything is glittering and beautiful, that it's an advanced society. He hears about the pyramids and the things that they've built. He's like, oh shit, that's crazy. Not to mention Tenochtitlan, where the Aztec capital was, where the Mexica capital was
out on the lake.
Yeah, it was out on an island in the water. So that's plausibility enough to be like, well, the water just drained away and this is what's left.
Yeah.
But we have the concentric circle with a big island that's the capital city. So I can see how he'd get a little confused. Francis Bacon, fake Shakespeare, also somehow agreed with this. He wrote some, I guess, flattering words about Plato and his agreement. But Mayan societies were just looked at as this mirror image of this Atlantean culture, as we just talked about. You have massive temples.
Leaning into that, so you know how you have Aquaman has Atlantis for DC.
Yep.
So Marvel has Namor. And Namor, especially in like the Black Panther movies that he's been in, that is very much a Mayan type, like Aztec type culture.
Yeah, I never really put that together.
So it's kind of like they lean to both sides of the Atlantis thing.
Well, there's no way that Marvel was going to sit back and let
That's what I'm saying is like
IP
they looked
adjacent Atlantis.
That's what I'm saying is they looked at it and said, hey, where's Aquaman from? We got to design a new character that's our Aquaman. Well, he's from Atlantis. Kind of want our guy to be from Atlantis. They don't have a copyright on Atlantis because that's Plato shit. So they were like, well, their Atlantis is like kind of in the traditional Atlantis sense. They're like, are there any other versions that anyone knows about? They're like, this guy, De Gama, actually said it was kind of like inspired by Aztec and like Mesoamerican culture. It's like, perfect. Print it, film it, do it.
Close enough. 1516 rolls around. There was a British gentleman named Sir Thomas More. I guess we are going up there. He wrote a book called Utopia, and this was inspired both by Atlantis and then just accounts of these travelers to America. So you have this new world that you can start pointing to and being like, this place would be great for a utopia. How do we build upon that? We look back at Plato's work with Atlantis and try to explain it in a way to where we can start to put the pieces together to tie old world and new world stuff together.
That's what it is. You have to find the kernels of truth. And I think at the time, if we were to be reading this at, when Plato had written it, we don't know what he was talking about. We wouldn't have any idea what he would even use for inspiration. That stuff's so fantastical. But going with his interpretation of it, and then looking at the Mediterranean, the area, around the Aegean, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit with like suspected places that were this inspiration for Atlantis. You can now look at that and say, oh, yeah, definitely. I see where he got that from. You wouldn't have been able to do that back when he first wrote it.
True.
So now people are looking at this the further we get in time, and it's like we now know more because we can see more.
Yeah, and we're outside of Greece.
But you still have people writing it like was a real thing in the way that Plato described it.
I wonder if the Spanish felt any sort of way knowing that the Strait of Gibraltar was just below them. Like they were the closest civilization out to where Atlantis could have been.
Yeah. No, there's nothing out there, man. Canary Islands are off Africa. Azores are off of like Portugal or Spain.
That's right. We've been out to the Azores. The Azores definitely aren't Atlantis, so not there. 1882, a man named Ignatius Donnelly. Very interesting figure. This guy, I believe, ran for or was a vice president. He lived in Minnesota. He's played a role in a couple different things. I want to say that he was part of the 1882. Yeah, he was part of the Civil War. He fought for the Union.
His name's Ignatius. Of course he fought in the Civil War.
He publishes something called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Antediluvian meaning before the flood. I'm pretty sure that if he wrote it post-Diluvian world, it would have been pretty short book.
Do you think that comes from delugian? Because like a deluge is a lot of water.
Deluge?
No, I'm completely wrong on this. I'm not going to pull off another O'Hare shot in the dark like I did during the Capone episode.
That was crazy.
I know, right?
I didn't see that coming. But this book claims that all known ancient civilizations were descended from Atlantis. This pisses me off. Ignatius got me by the short and curlies. Because how many times have we talked about an ancient civilization and then another ancient civilization that sprung up on opposite sides of the world?
They were doing kind of the same thing?
Yes. Yeah. That explains it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it also kind of pisses me off because it's a very Eurocentric view to believe that just because they weren't from this Europe area that you guys are from, that they weren't smart enough to be able to evolve. To say that there were no cradles of civilization of intelligent beings, they were all just idiots that then had to have these Atlantean people come and teach them how to build pyramids.
I think we kind of... I still think we nailed the concept of warfare and conflict driving the evolution of like technology and advancement, everything like that, because you're trying to find ways for you to not get killed so easy while at the same time killing your enemy much easier. You're going to be looking into metallurgy and all that kind of stuff, building processes that make things stronger so you can withstand a siege. When you're in a place like North America, like it was, South America, like it was, Africa, where everything is so spread out, people don't have to live on top of each other and have that conflict or anything like that. So you're not going to have, like you're saying, like you wouldn't think that when you're looking at those civilizations, like you really picture advancement.
No, but it takes a certain kind of mind to look at an area and be like, let's build a temple or let's build a pyramid.
Correct. But I'm not saying that advancement is always a good thing.
No, certainly not.
When they came over and they saw people they deemed less advanced, they assumed that it was because they were less advanced. If anything, it could be, no, we just don't do the whole, do you guys think just killing each other is advanced? Like, no, we move along with the herds and the land stays, how we want it and everything. Like, we've got shit figured out. We're good.
Yeah, I do wonder at the same time if when they showed up and they met the natives and they started seeing the bows and arrows fly, they figured that out. How did they figure out that type of warfare? Because,
Mongols.
but all the way in South America?
At the same time, you just get someone smart enough to understand the physics of how to, bend the stick and how it has stored energy and how you can tap that stored energy.
Type of warfare could have been an Atlantean bring over.
You're definitely, when you see that the first time and you think that you're the only people that have that, you're going to be like, which one of our guys gave that to you? Mm-hmm. You couldn't have figured that out. We just barely figured that out.
Yeah. He also claimed that the Garden of Eden resided in Atlantis. Talk about a swing.
See, now we're just throwing fucking noodles at the wall and see what sticks.
At the same time, though, if you're going by allegories and stories, Adam and Eve committing the first sin and being cast out of the Garden of Eden sounds like you could say, well, they got a hubristic streak in them and then were destroyed. Mm-hmm. So there's still a little playback there.
So instead of the Garden of Eden, it was actually they were at Atlantis.
Mm-hmm. Well, to keep going along with that, his belief for the destruction of Atlantis was part of the Great Flood myth. And I
tied it all back together.
Yeah, I want so badly to do a Great Flood myth episode, but I feel like the topic is so big, I don't really know where to start.
Do you know what the thing about a flood myth is? You don't have to have any proof of it. Because guess where the water goes back?
Dude, I think they had proof. I think that there...
I'm not saying there weren't floods. What I'm saying is there weren't floods in the sense of how they're painted.
No, but if the Black Sea's shoreline is 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet down, and then you have a break in a wall or something like that to where the Black Sea then floods and it's so much bigger, as water rises, that's going to be a flood myth for that local area that will then tell that, and it'll build.
Yeah.
So all of these different areas, when the water levels were low, once those water levels rose, that was a great flood for everybody. It wasn't the same great flood.
Yes.
But
that's what makes it believable. But that's what makes it believable.
Yeah.
Because people will be like, oh shit, yeah, we get floods.
Everybody has it in common. It's so fascinating to me, and we will figure it out one of these times.
What I mean is the large ones. People can identify and say, I know what a flood is. My, villages are always built first and foremost around sources of water.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are going to get destroyed and they're going to be lost. But things like a great flood that scoured the world clean, you also are dealing with people that never step outside their world. Their little 5 square mile area is the furthest they're ever going to go in life. And so they're like, I don't know how big the world is, but I know we had a flood here. Yeah. So yeah, I guess it did affect the whole world.
It flooded my world.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it flooded my world and you said something flooded your world, they all had to be the same flood.
Yeah.
Ignatius revives the Atlantis mythology in a big, big way. There's a lot of offshoots from Donnelly's work. One of them, it was kind of a rough offshoot. She was a Russian mystic. This woman, did you read anything on Helena Petrovna Blavatsky?
I did not.
Special lady. Russian mystic who founded the religious movement in the United States known as the Theosophists. It's an amalgamation of just a bunch of goofy shit. She does this in 1875. Part of Blavatsky's writings included The Secret Doctrine. This was published in 1888. So this is 6 years after Ignatius Donnelly throws out the antediluvian world of Atlantis. She said the book was originally dictated in Atlantis. Feels like a bit of a stretch. The book claimed the Atlanteans were cultural heroes that evolved from the 4th root race. There were a total of 7 root races, she said. I don't know if this was her theory or something that she just ascribed to. But the Atlantean race was the 4th root race, the 5th root race being the Aryans. Mm-hmm. So these root races don't go extinct, and then there's another one that grows up. The next root race that comes after it is superior to the previous root race that comes after it. I think you know where we're going with this. The 5th root race being the Aryans are considered now the modern human race that they were a part of.
So eugenics. She's writing a book on eugenics.
Pretty close, yep. Atlantean civilization reached its peak at 1,000,000 to 900,000 years ago. So if Plato wasn't crazy enough saying 9,000 years from when Solon told the story, she's pushed this shit back to 1,000,000 years ago.
Good luck finding anything.
But no, because the secret doctrine was dictated in Atlantis. So this book's 1,000,000 years old that she's putting out. I'd like to say that that's where the crazy shit stops, but she described the Atlanteans as giants with strong, beautiful bodies, some having Mongolian features. Their skin had transitioned from bronze skin to red, brown, yellow variations. So, what she's saying is these were the fourth root race, and now they are red, brown, and yellow-skinned people, and we have an Aryan race who is now the human race.
So what she's saying is that when a new root race rises up, it's not like they're destroying the previous root race. Those other root races are basically like, get the fuck off Atlantis, and they spread out to other parts of the world, which is the answer you get for other cultures and races.
Mm-hmm. She believed they were highly advanced, but they were spiritually corrupt. They were said to, this is incredible that she comes up with this, but she is a mystic, so maybe she saw it coming. They used black magic to create human-animal chimeras that were used, so human-animal hybrids. They were using black magic to make humans have sex with animals to create these hybrid chimera creatures.
So I hate to say this, it's chimera. It's chimera, and I only know that because it's a D&D thing too.
It's actually chimera.
It's actually chimera. It's from. It is actually the head of a lion, and it's got the paws of a.
No, but actually, it's an amalgamation of animals, and I want to say it has like a scorpion tail.
Well, you're using them.
It's extremely dangerous to fight on your own, Adam.
These chimeras were used for these monster armies. They were used as servants. So she is claiming that not only were the Atlanteans a superior technological state, but they had these chimeras that were used as the armies to fight these areas. Did I get it that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Just crazy to say. Their misuse of power and unnatural creations led to a moral decline, and then eventually the destruction that happens. The continent sinks into the ocean.
Did you get Edgar Casey?
No, I'm glad you did though, because he's a wild man.
So Edgar Casey, kind of coming after her, he was, I don't know how else to describe it. He was a famous psychic, probably in the turn of the century, like 1900s, early 1900s.
Yeah, I don't think famous does the right words. Do you have a list of some of his clients?
It was pretty substantial as far like current president or former president. I'm trying to remember the names. I can't. Look it up while I keep going. So his thought was that Atlantis...
Warren Casey?
Huh?
Warren Casey?
Edgar Casey.
Edgar Casey.
So his thought was that it had been off the coast of Cuba, and that the Cuban island used to be much, much bigger, which would fit the bill for the size description that Atlantis had had. But 10,000 years ago, when this thing called Meltwater Pulse 1b caused the 10-meter rise, just the ice sheet from North America caused it to rise by about 10 meters, so a little over 30 feet. Basically, part of that, land that Atlantis was actually on caved into the sea and is off the coast of Cuba.
It's a theory. You're not giving them a full good picture of Edgar Casey. Edgar Casey's clients, as this mystic and as this spiritual guide, all start...
Is he a guru?
Guru, yes. Because he suffers a coccyx injury during a football game, and he starts to basically be spoken to from the other world while he's asleep. There's a story of him being a child where...
So he breaks his tailbone.
Yeah.
And it aligns it differently to where he picks up different reception. And now he's hearing from the realm beyond.
Apparently his tailbone was the antenna.
And you were like with rabbit ears, how you used to, for those of you who don't know, TVs used to have antennas. They called them rabbit ears.
So Edgar Casey said that he came home one day to basically give his father his spelling assignment for the week. He missed all the words. His father beat him mercilessly. That night he fell asleep, and in his mind, all of the words were spelled out for him, and he was able to understand everything. He woke up the next day, and he started basically just nailing all these words. He believed that he could heal people's injuries by hearing about them and then dreaming about them and coming up with a way to fix them the next day.
Still not seeing any holes in this.
This man's client list: Harry Houdini, Thomas Edison, President Woodrow Wilson, and Marilyn Monroe. This guy had a hell of a grift going on where he was a healer that was healing people by sleeping. That sounds like a great way to make money.
Yeah, rest as you like does wonders.
And so he's hearing these things in his sleep. Him knowing where Atlantis is feels like it's going to carry a little bit more weight if he's the healer of the president.
No, well, yeah, 100%. I mean, if anything, it's going to sound out there to some people, but especially since the last person they probably heard anything from was Madame Rasputin or whatever her name was. They're like, really? The same? He's like, no, it's not like that. It's not like that, what that lady was talking about.
Pavlotsky, she thought about things differently.
Someone that did actually think that she was onto something is who we're going to talk about next. Now, it would not be a history podcast unless we got to discuss, at one point or another, the Nazis. So, the Nazis were extremely interested, especially because the whole thing that they were trying to propagate was that they were descendants of the Aryan race, of the master race. And since the master race was actually created on Atlantis, in order to prove that they were the master race and their descendants, they would need to find Atlantis, right? Mm-hmm. Who do you put on the job?
Himmler?
Why not, right?
Seems like a pretty good choice.
Initially, so to support the whole Aryan superiority theory, they searched for archaeological evidence that they had descended from them, a race that transcended human standards. Now, originally, this department or group was I'm trying to kind of think. I don't think it had a name initially until it got absorbed into the SS, but it was led by this guy named Hermann Wirth.
I believe they were Austrian too.
Were they?
Yeah, not that it really matters in the whole grand scheme of things, but not German, Austrian.
Okay. So after that, it was led by Heinrich Himmler, who was the head of the SS, and the search for Atlantis pretty much took place throughout the entire lifespan of the Third Reich. So Wirth had the belief that it was in the Atlantic, past the Pillars of Hercules. It had reached its height 25,000 years ago. So, I mean, he's getting it closer. He's not splitting the difference with the Russian lady, but he's keeping it within the realm of, Plato's works.
He kicked it down the field.
Mm-hmm. And that Nordic races, who the Germans said they descended from, were the ones that had descended from the Aryan race that had left Atlantis.
Meaning that Atlantis was not out in the Atlantic Ocean, was somewhere around Sweden.
I don't think it was Wirth. It was someone who was also, I believe, in the SS. They had also sent another expedition into Tibet and the Himalayas, looking for it in case they wanted the two extremes. They're like, it's either a civilization at the bottom of the ocean or it's going to be way high up in the mountains. So we're going to split and you guys are going to go look in both places.
It's going to be super hard to go to Tibet and find a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person, you'd think, right?
One would think.
Yeah.
But if this is a hidden city kept separate from the rest of society, then they would still be the pure Aryan race. I
guess there is the other side of that where if you do find a lot of them, you're probably on to something. Mm-hmm. Something's going on.
It's like when you go down to Argentina.
Yep. Yeah, and you see a little Germany. Mm-hmm. Weird immigration. Pavlotsky. Can't leave her too long. She influenced and touched a man named Carl Maria Villegut. And Carl Maria Villegut, I don't know where Maria comes from. That feels like it was maybe a toss-in. Joins the SS in 1933 at the request of Heinrich Himmler. Villegut became kind of the mentor to Himmler and influenced a lot of this mystical, occult type stuff and all of these rituals. He was actually known as Himmler's Lord of the Runes. And if you're known as Himmler's Lord of the Runes, you probably have some swinging influence with this guy.
This is, as Hollywood as it is, this is like searching for the lost art type shit. They're not just searching for Atlantis. They're searching for any of these, things that represent religious myths, things like that, any symbols of power that they can possibly get.
Yeah, it's a... Why does it always end up with the Nazis?
So in 1935, so in 35, this is where Himmler and Wirth established this thing called the Ahnenerbe. And basically it was the SS pseudoscience organization. It was this elite team of SS archaeologists, scientists, and historians. Now, they believed in this thing so much, and there was backing to this, that they built this thing called the Atlantis House. And it was completed in 1931. It was designed with the sole purpose of the study of the connection between the Aryan race and the Atlanteans. The facade of this had a carved wooden mural of Odin crucified on the Tree of Life. Because they had believed, because Nordic, Odin, that kind of stuff, that somehow Poseidon, Odin, there was some type of weird connection there. Now, the top room, I think it was a 3 or 4 story building. The top room was called the Heavens Hall. And this was basically a classroom where young Nazi SS archaeologists and historians would basically be taking their classes on study of this kind of stuff, where they were going to be going out and looking for it at. The house still stands and everything. I think the mural actually might have got burned away in like a burning raid when there was a fire.
That's okay with me.
But they said the structure and like the architecture of the house is like all this exposed metal. So it was them trying to like create this building in the style of what maybe they believed like Atlantis was kind of like.
That puts it in a different perspective. I was thinking bad vibes just all the way around, but if it looks a little Atlantean, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Be impressive. All the stuff that goes on inside of it.
The outside of it looks completely normal, though.
Yeah. Also, before we move off of her, Blavatsky's people, the Theophysis, they were the ones that had began using the swastika again. So that was where it was adopted from the German occultists to become the...
Oh, that's where it came from?
Well, that wasn't the first stop that it made, because I believe it's like a Buddhist symbol, but they were using it as the Theophysis or whatever they were called as a symbol of, I believe, what was it?
And were they using it prior to the Nazis using it?
Yeah. Blavatsky's Theosophical Society used the swastika as a symbol of cosmic electro-spiritual force, which was later adopted by German occultists as a symbol of Aryan identity.
That's nuts.
She played a hell of a role.
Jesus.
It's a pretty interesting symbol to be passed around.
Well, that symbol is not associated with the Theophysis now.
No. Question. Were we better off that World War II happened, or were we worse off that World War II happened because it stalled the German exploration for Atlantis?
I think we're still better off now.
You don't think, would you have traded the Germans just searching for Atlantis for no World War II?
I don't know what you want to... Yeah. I don't even give a fuck if they found Atlantis.
Maybe they'd just go there and stay there.
Yeah.
It would
keep them busy.
It's true. I guess if you can fit a population of 7 million on there, maybe the Germans could just go live their own life. The Nazis could just go.
Nazis, yeah.
They could leave Germany, and all the Nazis could just go to Atlantis
and repopulate the Aryan homeland.
And hell, maybe we get around to, maybe Poseidon pops back up. We just sink the Nazis into the ocean. That seems like a win-win. I don't hate that.
And back.
And we don't have World War II. Yeah, it's a little thought game there. But the Nazis felt that this secret doctrine was this mythological pretext for their ideology and for eventually what they do with the Holocaust. That, to me, is just like you said earlier, we're a history podcast. The Nazis are going to fit into this. We're going to go all the way from Plato to the Nazis every single time.
But to actually know that part of their theology and their entire propagated myth about like the Aryan superiority came somehow out of Atlantis.
What do you think Plato's belief would be if he got to see everything that sprung up from this one story? Like, you think he's happy? You think he's mad because nobody got the point of it?
I think it would be like if I'm trying to think of a more light comparison. So like an author that writes one book, but it like bestseller, it catches like fucking wildfire. And there's all of a sudden all of this fan fiction that comes out of it. Not just people writing on the internet and shit like that, but people writing other books completely based on this one. And you're just like, that's totally not what my book, none of these characters were going to do this. Like the inspirations that you're using are completely wrong. I feel like that's what it would have been. The other thing I think he would have looked at is like, you guys believe this shit? You guys have literal machines flying through the sky. And you believe that there was a sunken, technologically advanced city, and that Poseidon and the other gods sunk it. You don't even believe in the gods in the same way, yet you believe in the thing that they sunk. Like,
yeah, that's, I didn't even put that together.
It's a buffet of what you want to pick out of it to believe.
You don't even believe in Poseidon. How does this go about? Well, now I feel like we got to be to the point to where we have to start talking about where maybe some of this imagery that Plato uses comes from. And in the area of Greece where they were, if there was sure things to happen to that area, it was going to be earthquakes, it was going to be tsunamis, and it was going to be volcanic eruptions. Like, it's just, that area over there is so rife with that in Plato's time, he's heard and or seen these events take place in other places that he's either visited previously or goes to see the destruction. So he has that ability. And this first example is just something that I wanted to point to. It has absolutely nothing to do with Plato. But in 1871, there was a German businessman. He was an amateur archaeologist. His name was Heinrich Schliemann. He used Homer's Iliad as a guide to basically locate the site of the Trojan War in Hisarlik, Turkey. He used just the worst excavation method that I could ever imagine.
So he located like the site of the Trojan War. So Troy.
He went to a place where he believed Troy was.
Based upon the descriptions and where Homer said it was.
And then he started his archaeological dig with dynamite.
As you do. You got to get the big stuff out of there first before you think they're just moving with like paintbrushes or little brushes and stuff the whole time. No.
He blows the shit out of this area. But in blowing the shit out of this area, he starts finding these artifacts.
Pieces of artifacts.
Yeah, pieces of artifacts. This was a pot. This was a helmet. But now the dynamite got to it. But he's finding these artifacts from this major war that happened outside of where this city is in Turkey. So this is a look of where he's like, oh shit, Homer was telling the truth. This is a story that was written so long ago that has some accuracy to it. Now, there is a catch to this, because when Schliemann was blowing shit up with the dynamite, he had actually blown past the strata layer that all of these pieces would be from, that all of these artifacts would be from. And when they've gone through and dated the artifacts that were found from the area, they found that it was maybe a couple hundred years before the Trojan War is said to take place. But there again, are we seeing a repeat of what Plato does, where Homer heard of a war that went on in this area and then attributed the Trojan War to it and built a story?
Oh, yeah.
Off of something that most likely didn't happen. We didn't have anybody named Achilles. They didn't fight a war over a pretty woman. So you find a place that's a war and then you tell it a different way.
Well, and I don't know what the time frame, I can't remember what the time frame between the Iliad and the Odyssey were, but how long is Odysseus gone for? He's gone for a long time.
Yeah.
So Homer's not writing that right after the Trojan War because he's also writing about Odysseus. So it's very possible that it could be hundreds of years. And the fact that it's even within hundreds of years, that's pretty crazy because no one thought this existed.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I want to shit all over Atlantis, people believing in it. This is pretty cool. The fact that he was able to find where Homer was talking about the Trojan War taking place.
And I mean, he finds the walls and everything like that, but they're not as grand as Homer did. Of course, there's going to be punching it up and everything, but he finds obviously a city that used to be here that fits the description of Troy. It's got the large walls and everything.
Yeah, pretty cool.
And what that does too is that says, like you just were alluding to, if Homer said this and everyone thought that this was complete bullshit, but now we're being shown that although it's not to the scale or it's not exactly how it was described, this obviously existed. An inspiration for this existed. So all of a sudden now there's this thought process of what if that was what Plato was doing? He was taking inspiration from certain things that had happened in certain places, and that's what he was describing as Atlantis. And then it drums up this new interest in being like, all right, we're not looking for Atlantis now. We're looking for the places that meet the description of Atlantis that he would have drawn from.
The criterion, something that we can look to. I did these out of order on the boards because I feel like there's a likelihood that I wanted to put these into. So these next three places that we talk about aren't going to be in any linear time order. This is just interesting places. So 1988, there's a Greek archaeologist. Her name is Dora. Oh, I tried this last night.
Cassinopoulos?
Yes, we'll go with that. Greek names somehow got harder.
Yeah.
She launches this project to search for the lost city of Halaiki. And they thought that the ancient city had sunk into the Corinthian Gulf that was in Greece. Ancient accounts they ended up using from were actually from other Greek authors because they go through this area in the Corinthian Gulf and they don't find where Halaiki could be. There's nothing of this evidence that's there. So they go back and they start looking at other Greek authors. They see Strabo. Strabo wrote of the cave that had a Hercules statue in this town outside of Halaiki that still exists. Goes up there, she's looking out. In Strabo, he talks about a city that was 7 miles away from the area of Halaiki that ends up sinking into the ocean. She looks at another ancient Greek work and sees that Halaiki is 3 miles from this other ancient city that still has remnants of it today. And they go directly where the 7 miles to the right of the other city and 3 miles to the left. Yes. And they end up landing in this place. Where was it? It was under this lagoon that was inland. And they end up starting to kick around the lagoon as they're going through and trying to dig down. They're running into an issue where the water table is still so high that whatever is underneath it will be underwater, but also they're digging through silt and mud.
You have to get way away from it to be even able to get anything solid, and then you don't know if you're so far away from it that you're just missing it entirely, whatever you're searching for.
Well, what sealed Atlantis?
The mud,
Water and mud. So as they end up digging down, they find Halaiki underneath this, using 2 other Greek authors to find this city that had written about this place that potentially was somebody that Plato used. The belief was that there was an earthquake that caused soil liquefaction. As the earthquake happened, any sort of structure that was in the soil, rain, anything like that that's hitting is going to just sweep this mud, end up coming down over the city. It sinks the city. As the earthquake happens and the soil underneath it also liquefies, it's going to sink down below the water table. From what it sounds like, it was already pretty close to the water table in and of itself. A tsunami ended up breaking through on the beach and let a bunch of water in. And it's said that this was submerged 373 BCE. So we're talking a matter of 13 years before Timaeus and Critias are written. Kind of interesting that this happened in Greece. It probably would have been heard about, and this happened 13 years. This could be something that Plato could point to, and everybody that's in that class is going to be like, well, we've heard about Halaiki. I wonder if that's a similar situation.
So I'm kind of making notes here because I want to see what he drew from. I feel like with Halaiki, he hears a story and they're like, did you hear about Halaiki? And he's like, no, what happened is like earthquake came down, completely covered the city in mud. Well, did they try to dig down to like they couldn't. There was too much mud. They couldn't locate the city. He's like, all right, I now know that you can't locate a city if you just say that it was covered in mud.
Now there's just a lagoon there. Mm-hmm. But this comes at a time where you can look at it, you can make a direct reference to it as far as this happens in his lifetime. Some of these other cities that we're going to be talking about that have been lost are going to take place 1,000 years prior to him. And I don't know how oral tradition works. I don't know exactly what was written about these places, but one of the cultures we're going to talk about was previously completely lost until they found it again. So if it was lost to us, and we have a lot of ancient Greek historical record, we should have seen that it was there, right?
Yeah.
So 1,000 years could be a big difference. 1900. There's a British archaeologist that rediscovers a Minoan palace that was believed to be King Minos' palace. This takes place on Crete. So we are now on an island.
So Crete, location-wise, if you're going off of the tip of Greece, it is almost like at the 4 or 5 o'clock, correct?
Yep. And it's the largest island in Greece.
Yep.
But now we're talking about an island. Now we're talking about an actual piece of land that's out on the water, but we run into those nasty pillars again because it's still sitting right around the Aegean. So
Okay, so here's my beef. I remembered it. He's writing that it's beyond the pillars of Heracles. He's writing that as the description. That didn't take place. They weren't named that until the Greeks put a name to that.
To the pillars?
To the pillars.
Yeah. Oh, 9,000 years. Yeah.
How does he know when they're describing something they just said where two pieces of land get really close together? He's like, oh, well, I guess that, has anyone heard about that? They're like, oh, well, when you're going through the pillars of Heracles, you can see both sides of it. You know where you can also see both sides? Strait of Messina. You can also see it when you go between any landmass and an island where there's maybe two mountains or something. It could have been literal to where in Greece, between two islands, they could have risen two obelisks or two pillars or something. And they named those the Pillars of Hercules.
So you're telling me that ancient Egyptians didn't know the story of Heracles?
No,
know about
I don't
the pillars?
believe they did. What I'm saying is that there's no way. How does that come across in translation for him to just be like, oh, yeah, they're talking about, the Strait of Gibraltar.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I knew it as soon as they were talking about Heracles that we were on the same page.
I feel like, again, this is a conglomeration of things that he's taking, just like with that place being covered in mud. He knows that he can't go any further east because everyone knows what's over there. That's where the Persians come from. Of course, it's not where the Atlanteans come from. So he just says it's west.
Yeah. So this area is located on the north coast of Crete. This palace is incredible. This palace covers 150,000 square feet. It was a hub of this thriving civilization that began around 2400 BCE. This is where we come back to, I believe it was the seventh labor of Heracles when he goes down to fight the bull of King Minos.
The Minotaur.
Yeah, it turns, well, I think that's the story of the Minotaur. What they see is there's all this bull iconography just covered this palace, this Minoan culture that they're finding. And who's the animal of Poseidon?
Yeah, the bull. Also horses, right?
Yeah, who gives the blue bull that Hercules has to try to drown?
I don't think I think it's a white bull.
I thought it was blue.
I think you're thinking Babe the Big Blue Ox.
Could be. Definitely could be. Maybe it is a white bull. I like that you're saying that now, and I went to Babe too quickly. But you have a direct tie-in to this area in Crete and King Minos and Poseidon all in this same area. And this is a story that everybody knows. So he's talking about the bulls and they're hearing about this. it's got to be this area of Minos.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And this is something that you're able to tell people about, that maybe they're not going to go to Crete and know about this, or this is a place on Crete. So you're even tying it into real stuff. Yeah. They don't know that he doesn't have a giant maze underneath his house
that he keeps the Minotaur in.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have to get to, how does this happen? So they're going through, they're looking at this city, and they're finding all of this pumice and all of this volcanic ash that is choked out the city. It looks like there may have been some tsunamis that hit her, earthquake certainly on the table. They calculate this destruction right around 1627 BCE. Problem is, there's not a goddamn volcano on Crete.
You know where there is one? Santorini. So Santorini is pretty much due north. It kind of feels like from the middle of Crete, if you were to just go straight up north. So
I think they said it's about 60 miles.
Yep. I think it was somewhere between, I was having trouble because it kept telling you like travel wise and everything.
Oh.
It's somewhere 60 to 88. Let's go with that range. Not far.
No.
So Santorini, as it is today, is like a tourist destination. Now, Santorini itself is almost like you could almost imagine it as a circular island. It's got a few breaks in it. So probably about, what would you say, about 3/5 of a circle for this island. And then in the middle of it, it has another island. Now,
the caldera.
Yep. So Santorini is actually a supervolcano. And the area that is above water around it is the rim of the caldera. The area in the middle is an island that was grown out of the lava flow that kept coming up after an eruption that had happened, the one that Adam was talking about around 1600 BCE. Now, this thing is the largest in like human recorded history. This is the largest eruption that's ever happened. And I got some volcano eruption facts. We're going back to Pompeii. Yes. The way that they've been able to reconstruct it based upon, of course, historical facts and everything like that, also monitoring the area of the caldera and everything, was that once it had built up and due to its eruption cycle, the middle of the island would have been built up about a mile high. So it's a big, big fucking mountain. Now, the eruption goes on for days on this. And when this thing actually blows, because it is so large, and it's also blowing the water and everything up with it as it's blowing all this stuff up out of the water and up into the sky, it's not just the mountain that's above the water that's being launched out. It's all that stuff like we talked about in Pompeii that's between the lava where it's actually the chamber and then everything in the top.
Not the pyroclastic flow. That's the one that goes down.
That's the one once there's enough of a cave in to cut the pressure that's yes. So the mass of rock that was like ejected would equate up to Mount Everest being blown up into the atmosphere. It was so large. Records of the surrounding area, and when I say surrounding area, I do mean Crete, parts of Africa, parts of Eurasia and everything, experienced a winter that lasted for 2 years.
God damn.
It put so much particulate and blocked out the sun so long, a winter lasting 2 years. Game of Thrones shit. It caused up to 800-foot tsunamis. And what's one of the closest places, somewhere between 60 and 88 miles away from that thing, is Crete. They said the blast was so devastating for those pyroclastic clouds that it disintegrated people on the beach in Crete.
Man.
The shock wave, there's records in Egypt that they were able to track back to this time frame that talk about the damage done to the pyramids because of the shock wave.
Wow. That's a volcano.
800-foot wave is going to destroy. I don't know how the place still was like standing enough to where they could find it.
Fair.
For minuses.
Just thinking of the power that wave hits with. Yeah, that's nuts. when they go through in 1967, they excavate Santorini, and it reveals the lost city of Arcotiri. It was founded in the 5th century on what was known as Thera, which is present-day Santorini. The advanced Minoan society was underneath it.
The what?
The Minoan people were underneath that.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost like a little bit of a stack job that's going on there. But I don't know if they were exactly Minoan, but they believed that they could have been people that were trying to get away from
Minoan adjacent.
Yeah, when the big one happened. But this thing that you're talking about, this volcanic caldera that's on Santorini, matches the concentric ring shapes of land and water with these dried riverbeds that are around it.
So did you watch the special on the guy that went to Santorini? And okay. So like we listed off, there's that criteria that it has to meet to fill in Plato's, little connect the dots boxes. So it's not going to go ahead and be beyond the pillars. But again, that could just be simply what were the pillars at that point back then? You said there was the alternating concentric rings, colored stone for architecture, the channel that would connect it to the ocean, hot springs, and a trade hub. So during excavations, also, like you said, land aplenty. It had to have enough stuff to be able to support people. Santorini is not that today. It's very kind of barren, high winds. They can grow, the grapes that they grow are like grown low to the ground. But of course, when you get eruptions like this, you can go down through the layers to see what was in those layers underneath the pumice to try to kind of tell you the story of what was going on there. Digging below the layers of pumice, they're able to find regular soil and plant matter from trees, from certain grains and grasses. So they can tell that this stuff was grown on this island.
Well, you're also talking about before Big Bertha hits, that's still very volcanic soil that's going to be great for growing things. So just like Pompeii had the big fields of grapevines, that was because that was all built on the volcanic soil that was just short of Vesuvius.
So they did sonar imaging and everything like that all around the bay. They did it between the islands of Santorini and were able to determine based upon previous eruptions that certain segments that separate the islands are where cave-ins happened, where once the caldera was done and the rock was weakened, all that pressure from the ocean on the outside came rushing back in. So you can see where, if it's like, when you see someone dig a little trench at the beach and then you see it widen and widen and widen as the water's flown out of it, it just kept doing that to make these big open spaces because the shallowest spots are the edges around the caldera where it could have been brought up, except for one area that's very, very deep. And it's this wide channel that goes from the interior of the island out into the sea. They found hot springs on Santorini because of the
volcano. That makes sense.
Volcanic activity. When they were digging up Akrotiri, they found, just like they did in Pompeii, the paintings and everything like that on the wall. They found them of the actual villages and the towns that were actually there. They had the paintings where you could see the red rock behind it. So they were able to determine where these places actually were within Santorini. They had a ton of ships. All these drawings had a ton of ships. They're obviously there was a lot of shipping and trade and everything going on here. They also showed that even though, of course, anything that was built, because one of the big things about Atlantis was on that center island, there was a Acropolis, and that's where the Temple of Poseidon was. And on the Temple of Poseidon, it had Poseidon being drawn by 4 winged horses in a chariot. And so that's at the very center. Then there were, I think, residences and everything on the outside, like the rings going out. And then, of course, residences and people living around the rim of it and everything. So they had to determine there's an island sitting there in the middle, like you said, grown from the caldera once the eruption started to kind of taper off. So they're like, wouldn't it stand to reason that there was also one of these that was standing here in the middle of it prior to the eruption, and anything that would have been on that island when it erupted, there would be no trace of it. It would have been launched up into the air and just pulverized and destroyed down to like fucking atoms. So I'm not saying this is, of course, I'm not saying this is Atlantis, but if you're trying to paint a picture of a civilization, Akrotiri, I think we talked about it a little bit or alluded to a little bit earlier, the second and third floor or story buildings that they had there, the second story toilets. And I know that sounds weird to like, be getting held up on that.
No, dude, it's poop and gravity. If there's an enemy to poop, it's everything below because of gravity.
But the second story toilets had the piping.
Yeah.
That actually drew it out of the house so you weren't sitting there smelling shit and just pooping down onto the street below.
Pretty advanced.
Which would have been insanely advanced at the time that this was, the city existed. Because, again, this isn't 360 BCE, where Plato's talking about it, even an advanced civilization for them. This is back at 1600 BCE when they had this stuff.
Credit to us for calling the shit poop. That was a pretty good little back and forth there.
Who got the lighter? But I feel like a lot of stuff was borrowed from the Minoan civilization and then like Santorini and Crete.
Yeah, and again, I think I keep getting hung up because we're talking about areas that all take place around Greece. Mm-hmm. And if they all take place around Greece, the long trip to Athens to fight Athens doesn't quite feel like it makes a whole lot of sense in the story. But I keep trying to make sense of the story, and that's the problem.
It's just people from Greece fighting other people in Greece, like they've always done. You need to have an outside enemy that you can then turn into the message, the lesson.
But it can't be too far away because you want to make sure that everybody's heard of these stories around Greece to draw something to it.
So during, a couple of the documentaries that I watched, they were like, let's look around sites around the Mediterranean and then other areas that could possibly be the inspiration of it. So they went to Malta because they're going to all these islands that could, because again, it's described as an island. So they go to Malta, don't really find a lot. Sardinia, they find the Strait of Messina, which could have been the Pillars of Hercules or Heracles. They're finding civilization, like signs of civilization, signs of advanced building, but it's nothing that would match up. It's either too far inland, it doesn't, check enough of the boxes. They go to, and I think one of the things with Malta was its size, but they also were able to, again, due to the radar, determine that there was a section of Malta that was probably at one point above the water, that almost doubled the size of it.
Yeah, there's something there.
Trying to think of any other islands that they thought it was going to be before moving outside the pillars, but I think we're ready to go out there.
Let's take the journey. Are we going to talk about Bimini?
Oh, no. Let's start out just right outside the Pillars of Heracles. So first place we're going to stop is a place in southern Spain. Right now, it's home of the Doñana Nature Preserve. And the Doñana Nature Preserve is basically I want to say 250 square miles of it is wetlands that are close to the coast. Now, it is just, you go outside the Strait of Gibraltar and start curving to the right pretty hard, and you're going to hit it. So, it's right outside there.
Still sounds like it's outside the pillars. Still sounds like it has access to North Africa and up into Europe over there to take those places.
And of course, watching these documentaries, the guys that are studying in these places and looking and are the specialists in these places are always going to feel like their place is the exact place where this is at.
Pseudo-archaeologists.
So they went through this wetlands. They weren't able to do a lot of it or really any excavation because it's a nature preserve, but they were able to do ground radar. They were able to find breaks at certain points in certain areas that they thought might have been walls because they were placed at strategic points or at a certain distance apart. They also, going through Plato's writings, he uses this word to describe it as an island. And there's 3 different meanings that this word can have. And I'm trying to find out where I wrote it down at. Nessos. The word is Nessos. Nesos. Now in Greek, if you were saying Nessos, you could apply it to 3 different things.
God damn it.
You could apply it to an island, an estuary, or a peninsula. What?
Playing this great game and these multiple meanings to try to bend things into possibilities is
Again,
what...
you were looking at me like I'm saying Atlantis existed. I'm not saying existed. I'm looking for the places where the ideas could have been pulled from.
I know, but you're taking these ideas from some wild people. Some people that would say that the Spanish government is stopping them
I'm just
from
giving you the
doing...
information. I didn't say. I said they saw something that could have been.
Okay,
walls.
all right.
I didn't say there were walls there.
This
Come on.
is why I'm defensive, because I burn an hour and 10 minutes listening to this Greek guy talk about how West Africa could be where this is, even though it's still on land. And he's talking about how there's different words.
You're taking it too seriously. You sit there and listen to my fictional histories,
All right.
and you buy into them. This can be the same thing, but they were able to find off the coast that would be off of Doñana. They were able to find like sunken structures that were walls and everything, like constructed walls. That doesn't mean that's Atlantis. All that means is that at a certain point, there was a civilization in that spot and the water rose up.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that somebody would park a fishing city or a fishing village right off of that area?
Any civilization that's going to develop is going to want to be right there as a center for trade.
You put any civilization in Spain, they're going to use that area.
They went even so far, and methane gets produced underground. Like, I'm not sure in what manner it does, but I know that there are natural methane pockets underground.
It's got to just be from natural matter decaying.
So they found a pretty large sealed methane pocket under a section of this wetlands, and they tied it in because, again, it's decaying matter and everything like that. They're like, this suggests that there's a large portion of dead bodies down there, like people sealed inside from Atlantis.
Does that mean that cows eat people and that's how they fart out methane? Same idea?
Technically, if you really want to think about it, some things have probably died in that ground and been fertilizer for plants, and they've grown up, and the cows have eaten that grass. Another place is the Algarve coast, South Portugal. So literally, I think it's within 100 miles of Doñana. And there they were able to find some of the other descriptors that Plato had said is that the smell of chestnuts had like permeated the air. They were so strong where he's getting information 9,000 years before Solon, and then he's hearing it from these people that Solon had talked to. I don't know why the chestnuts thing comes up. Oh, yeah. And by the way, Solon said that the whole place smelled like chestnuts.
Think the Egyptians had an understanding what chestnuts were?
Obviously they did, but what I'm saying is these little clues, how literally they take it, just because, honestly, he was probably traveling around at some point, went into a port, it smelled like chestnuts, and he's like, that's kind of a cool defining feature. I'm going to go ahead and keep that in my back pocket when I'm writing a story.
Tuck that away.
Atlantis is described as this place of great wealth, and there's a ton of like precious metals there in the south of Portugal. And then the capital city of Atlantis is what they appear to think to be Silvis, Portugal. And it's because the way that they tie this in is they're like, well, look, there's a fort up on a hill right in the middle of it. That would naturally be the place where the Temple of Poseidon would be. It's like, but didn't Atlantis get destroyed and all that was supposed to be wiped off? He's like, well, yeah, they just built the hill, on top of the ruins, I guess. Or wouldn't there still be stones and all that kind of stuff,
Maybe. I'll take a hit for the team here. Portugal's on my top 3 places that I need to go before I die. I'll go over and search for this. Yeah, I've taken...
I have to drag you to the south of Portugal?
Yeah, I think I've taken a different approach to this. I think I'm on their side now. The Spanish government's not letting us in Doñana to go check for this, so we need to go.
I don't have an interest in walking out with waders on trying to find this, but if you can show me South Portuguese town, yes, please. Also, I'd like to go check out Santorini, just for research purposes.
Yep.
Probably need to check out Crete.
Comparative.
Malta. We got to check out Malta.
Don't even know what it is or where it is.
Probably Sicily, Straits of Messina.
There's just so much to it.
Some other places that they had suspected are, I think, like you were saying, in the Caribbean. You get a thing called the Bimini Road.
I hate this too. Go ahead.
No, you take it.
No, It's
No, I want to hear you have to explain it because I would think I was putting on just a very neutral tone when I was trying to explain this stuff, and you looked at me like I was one of those people on fucking Ancient Aliens. I want to hear you describe the Bimini Road.
This Bimini Road is under this beautiful crystal clear water to where you're able to kind of make out these structures that appear to be. I heard one account that it looks like a Roman road, which again wouldn't make any sense because we're talking about Greece before Rome. But there are structures
The
that
Greeks didn't have roads.
no, dude, they built one over here. Well, this is an advanced society. That's what made them so advanced was they built roads. It appears it's a pretty decently long straight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's large rectangular shaped blocks that appear to be placed, purposely in a certain road type formation that stretches out.
There's pillars of rock that jet out.
Here's the thing. Okay, we know that Aztecs were great at carving. We know the Mayans were great at the Incans were great at all this stuff.
Yeah.
So what's not to say that prior to a flood or an earthquake simply sinking this section of land, that there didn't happen to be a capital city or a port city or something like that here where they had stone slabs for roads.
Telling me the Taino folks don't know how to build a road? It
That
seems
doesn't mean
logical.
but it all kind of leads to the mystique and keeps that in kind of the public eye about it's the what if. There was a place over in Japan that a scuba diver had found that appeared when you look at the pictures, you're like, there's no way that that's natural made. It was almost like a sidestep type pyramid that also had an entryway that had straight something on top of it that looked like a roof. And before he took anyone that was like an archaeologist or down there, I think he took a bunch of his friends. I think he had worked for a university, but everyone was like, yeah, there's no way that this is man-made. Other professors came and looked at it and they're like, it's extremely rare, but this is man-made. And he's like, well, how do you know? He's like, well, look at the way the shore is above it. And you can see that it's built into it where it's natural on top of it.
Yeah.
It's just simply the way the currents have kind of shaped around this and everything. But again, it kind of feeds into that mythology about it.
Yeah. Well, and if you're looking for something, you can always find something. It's not going to be exactly what you're looking for, but there will be pieces and elements that you can
If you already believe in it, you're able to support the evidence much better.
And that's I think kind of the main thing that I take exception to with this now is so many of the people that are talking about trying to find these places or that they believe that they have a read on it. And again, I give these people way too much brain space, but it's when
they're not hurting you.
When they start looking at the numbers and they say, well, Solon might have miscalculated on this part, or maybe these pillars weren't necessarily a part of it. Maybe he just put that into the story. At the end of the day, you either have two options with this. You either believe everything Plato says and take it all literally, or you believe that nothing that Plato says. Because if you're going to tell me that he lied about the numbers, the size of this place, or all of the resources that it had, or anything like that, but he told the truth about this place that nobody else in history had ever written about prior to him, even Homer's works, we have things that have taken place in the past that we know that these things happened.
You're telling me that at no point during that 9,000 years that it happened, that there weren't other records, and that once the Egyptians had probably told this story, there weren't additional records written by the Egyptians, or that in the time frame Solon got this, he came back and didn't put pen to paper about any of this. It was just passed by word of mouth.
He was
just
the
waiting for
wisest of the
someone to
seven
write down.
sages.
Yeah, just waiting for someone to actually write this stuff down.
And it fell all the way to Plato. So
here's the other thing too. If you're painting it in a way and you're Plato, you can't say, hey, Plato, what was so advanced about this civilization, Well, they had toilets on the second floor. You can't say stuff like that. You got to leave it vague to where people think of advancement. Well, it's like the Jetsons. The Jetsons takes place, or Back to the Future. Back to the Future 2 takes place in 2025. We don't have fucking hoverboards or anything like that.
No.
But that's what we thought we were going to have because that's where we thought the advancement was going.
our hoverboards have wheels.
Yeah, exactly. But it's almost just as, knowing that Atlantis really isn't real, but then looking at the stuff that actually inspired it, it's cool to think about. Like if I think about Santorini, I'm like, that would be really cool if it was like a circular like city and they had like was a trade hub and everything because it was right in the middle of like shipping lanes and everything.
Makes total sense.
But then to think about it, be like, oh my God, those people had no idea they were living inside a volcano. And then one day it just erupted. And not only did it erupt and just take them out, but it caused like a cataclysm throughout the whole region where it was winter for 2 years and everything.
Sounds like one of the worst eruptions we could think of.
That's more impressive than Atlantis itself.
Yeah. Yeah, there are things that definitely go beyond in the history more than what Plato said, but it's because we have a wider understanding of what happened. Mm-hmm. So all these things sound more fantastical, but back then, this might have been the most fantastical story anybody had ever heard.
Yeah, and it's not like Plato could just be like, oh, it's called Santorini or whatever. It was Thera, I think, at that point, too. Yep. He can't just say, I'm writing down the story of Thera, because people are going to be like, well, yeah, a lot of people know this story. I mean, it took place a while ago, but there's another place established. People have gone back to Santorini and everything like that. And they've established, another colony or whatever you want to call it. That's not as sexy as he needs it to be. He wants it to be like that, but he wants it to be more high tech. He wants it to be out in the Atlantic Ocean. He wants it to be a rival to Athens, that Athens could have risen up and defeated because it's so virtuous and it does things the right way. It was all a tug job for Athens is what it was.
This is what I want Athens to be. I want Athens to be ruled by these philosophers that I believe are the rightful leaders. I want everything to be in a neat and orderly fashion because I'm using this rational belief to guide everything.
And I want to make sure we don't turn into the Atlanteans in full peril or, fall into the trap that I said they fell into. Because you know what I can't do? I can't point to Santorini or Thera and say, well, they were bad guys. And people are like, well, no, there's no record of them going to war with anyone or anything like that. Well, the volcano exploded. Yeah, volcanoes sometimes explode, man. Pompeii exploded.
I think he played a trick on us.
It's an insanely long, it's the long game.
Yeah. So
the longevity of this trick is pretty impressive.
The gentleman that I was talking about that had the West African theory disappointed me. Out of the hour 20 that I had to watch this documentary, and I was waiting for the chicks to come, and I was waiting for the point, and it just kept getting further and further away. Right at about an hour and 11 minutes, he brought it all home. He brought it all back to me. So just to maybe point out where Plato was headed with this, in Book 1 of the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, it begins with a meeting of the gods on Mount Olympus. There is one god that is not present in that scene, and it is Poseidon. And Zeus begins with dialogue, saying, as he's looking down on human actions, he laments, mortals, they are always blaming the gods and saying that evil comes from us, when they themselves suffer pain beyond their lot because of their own recklessness.
Okay, so this is the end of the movie was the gods getting ready to talk. That was the end of Critias.
Yep.
The beginning of the Odyssey is the gods discussing this thing that they're not specific about. It's vague enough that you don't know what they're talking about. But when you tie it in with the prequel book,
yep,
Critias, or not Critias is a prequel, but the story of Atlantis that is told by Critias, that's the prequel. And it just it's the episode of TV that just picks right back up, like at the exact moment that the last episode ended. And it's God talking about, I'm upset because, they're blaming us for what we had to do. Poseidon's not here because he's probably upset at me. He's pouting because I had to destroy his city that was built by his sons and everything like that.
Or he's the one that's doing the destroying. Yeah. That's why he's not present at the meeting.
But that also feels like, do you think that is something that was, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to kind of think of how to phrase this. So do you think he ever pointed that out? I guess is what I'm trying to say is this is what happens after the Odyssey. Or sorry, this is what happens before the Odyssey leading up to it. I have the in. I got the know-how. You guys have probably already always wondered what that conversation was in reference to. I got the answer. It was Atlantis.
Well, because the Odyssey picks up after the Iliad when he's leaving, when Odysseus is leaving from the Trojan War, correct? Mm-hmm. So the Trojan War is already a battle that's happening.
Which is covered in the Iliad, right?
Yep.
I got a question. How did Plato spin this time-wise?
That I don't know.
So was he just discounting? Because he made a point to say it had happened 9,000 years before Solon. But he's also saying that, are the gods just now getting around to this? Is that what he's saying? Is that by the time the Odyssey rolls around, the gods have had to do so much god business and been so busy with other stuff that they're just now getting around to 9,000 years of business ago?
We don't know how many generations had gone through. We just know that the Atlanteans started 9,500 years ago, correct?
No, because remember, Solon tells him the story of the destruction.
Yeah.
Maybe time works, you know what? It's probably like, you guys, time works different on Mount Olympus. It's time's a little wonky. What seems like, a day for them or maybe minutes for them is hundreds of years for us. So by the time that, you know how hard it is to get all the gods together? You got to go find them all. You got to find Aphrodite doing her things. Ares looking after a war. I can't find Apollo. He's always chasing the sun. I've been looking around and guess what? We got to wait for Poseidon, guys. Hold on. How long have we been waiting? We've been waiting 10,000 years.
You're punching time holes in the only thing that I've been able to cling to.
I understand that, but what I'm thinking is they're like, okay, how long have we been waiting for Poseidon? They're like 10,000 years. He's like, okay, I can't, we all got stuff to do. I can't keep us here. We're going to have to do the meeting without Poseidon.
I'm going to have to throw this shit in reverse. We're going to have to deal with some other stuff. Mm-hmm. I think the tie-in is more of Odysseus' journey back home to try to maybe understand or teach these pupils to understand that where Athens is now, there's going to be trials to get back to where it was.
I think he saw a way to make his story popular.
That could be too. But there again, he's a philosopher. What's he looking for popularity? He's not making money off of anything.
No, I understand
he's a pious man.
Okay. Imagine that there wasn't this story of Atlantis. I'm not saying that completely takes Plato off the plate. Doesn't take Plato off the plate when it comes to philosophers. But the only account of Atlantis that has led to everything and more that we just talked about comes from Plato. Get rid of that, and it's just all philosophy.
That's what I mean, though. I don't think he realized this was going to be what it is. I don't think so either. But what I'm saying is, at the time, if he's writing this story and he's trying to make it believable, all you got to do is find something. Man, people still love the Iliad. They love the Odyssey. What's an open end in this story that I can tie it into? Well, fuck, the beginning of the book has the gods having a meeting and they're talking about how humans blame them for their misery and all this kind of stuff. Okay. Well, human misery happened when Atlantis, in this story that I'm writing, when Atlantis was destroyed. Well, fuck it. Okay, Poseidon finds Atlantis, and that's why Poseidon's not at the... he's trying to shoehorn it in. Yeah.
He has to explain why Poseidon's not at the meeting, and Poseidon wouldn't be at the meeting if it was in regards to the destruction of a city. Or maybe he was still there, and he was having to, as the god of, earthquakes and all that kind of stuff into the ocean, he was the one charged with its destruction. And they're having this conversation as it's going on.
There's a non-zero chance, too, that this could have been Tuesday's lesson.
Yeah. It's like what it's trying to do is it's trying to fit episodes or Star Wars shows in between the movies.
Yep.
And you got to pay attention to all the canon to make sure you don't contradict something that someone's going to point out. He's just sitting there being like, okay, how do I tie this in to the Iliad and the Odyssey? Okay, we're going to start with Poseidon. City, hubris. All right, here we go.
Let's make this work. I'm just going to start talking and we'll see what comes out.
Because isn't that also kind of the whole point about the Odyssey as well? That's why Odysseus gets sent on this Odyssey is because of Poseidon sending him like around the Aegean.
Sounds like we got a little link. Sounds like it could have been Poseidon Week at the Academy.
And Odysseus is the redemption story of what happens if you were to try to redeem yourself, like the Atlanteans didn't.
I think it's there. I think there's a chance. I think that you're pretty spot on with the timing and the time frame being maybe overlooked by Plato, but he also overlooked a couple other little details in the story too that would make no sense.
He made the story so cool that people didn't want to question the details.
Yeah. Yeah, all in all, just a very fun fictional history to go back and look at this. Greek stuff is so much fun. Also, I figured out that if I could hit the way back button, I think I go archaeologist. I think I put all my pursuits into archaeology. All of my sports pursuits and everything, I think I just focus on that. Because tell me that there's not a cooler job in the world to be able to travel to all these ancient sites and just look for this stuff.
They're probably not doing well financially, but they always look fucking happy.
How many documentaries have we seen with these goofy people on there?
That's what I'm saying, but they're happy.
I think they're making some money.
We have this thing where when we watch documentaries, we'll sometimes send each other pictures if like someone looks like really out there or is kind of really weird talking to like the camera. Am I not saying that? Camera? Jesus. Camera. And it's because they're excited, but these are people that probably don't get in front of the camera and have people show interest in their interest. If you had to pick what field of archaeological study, and you don't have to be super, super specific, but are you an Egyptian archaeologist?
Too hot.
Do you study Japanese, the past of the Japanese people? Do you try to find the origin of people in Africa? Are you hiking through the jungles to find Aztec Mayan ruins?
I think I'm just Greek and Roman. I think I'm around there.
I think you go with the classic. You go with antiquity.
The classic for sure, but just think about all of the stuff that we've talked about in those areas. I mean, an archaeologist at Pompeii does sound like the coolest job that I can think of.
One of the dudes that was being interviewed in the Santorini one just lived on Santorini, was an archaeologist there. That's his job. He just lives on some beautiful Greek island and goes to work, and they're like, "What'd you do today?" He's like, "I went out and I looked at the pumice layers for like 45 minutes, took some notes, and then fuck it, I just went on the beach.
Got baked, got myself a Euro, headed down to the beach.
Wrote down some theoretical shit with what I think could be possible here. But yeah, all in all, a good day.
I'm going to work this theory through a little bit more till about 1 tomorrow, and then I'm going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feels like a pretty good life to lead.
Think about battlefield archaeologists would be kind of cool too. Not landmine battlefields, but like prior to ordnance that could be unexploded, being able to search those kind of things, like going to search someplace where the Mongols had raided or something.
What if that was the hierarchy? Like, once you get your law degree, you go into being like a public defender, and you have to try to build yourself up that way. The first level of archaeologist is you're a landmine archaeologist.
You have to start with current time.
You're excavating
and then
stuff.
You get to work your way backwards. That's why the ones that are just old as fuck are the ones that study the oldest stuff.
The first level is the Dust Bowl. You have to go excavate down on that southern plain, and then you finally get to move further
go
out.
To fucking Kansas for 2 years. Oh, yeah, this one was fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Fictional histories are just great.
All right, man. You got anything else?
No, I think we're good.
All right, everyone. Well, we hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.